Rancher gave a ride to an Apache widow. By law, he became the man she must marry. The sun was just beginning to rise over the wide open plains, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. A light breeze rustled the tall grass, carrying the scent of earth and wildflowers. On a narrow dirt trail that cut through the plains, a lone rancher guided his horse steadily forward. His boots pressed into the stirrups with ease, and his hands held the reins with a practiced grip. He had traveled this trail many times before, delivering supplies to small settlements and checking on his distant cattle. The early morning air was crisp, and the world felt quiet, except for the soft creaking of the wagon wheels and the occasional clatter of a distant herd. As he rounded a bend, he noticed a figure struggling beside the trail. It was a woman, small and determined, trying to push a wooden wagon that had clearly seen better days. The wagon's wheel had broken, and it leaned dangerously to one side, threatening to spill its contents across the dusty road. She was dressed in simple, worn clothing, but it was clear that she had taken care to keep herself neat. Her dark hair fell in loose waves across her shoulders, and her hands were rough from labor. The rancher slowed his horse, observing her carefully. There was a strength in the way she moved, a quiet determination that spoke of someone used to hard work and challenges. He guided his horse closer and called out in a friendly voice, "Ma'am, do you need some help?" The woman paused, glancing up with surprise. Her eyes were wide, reflecting both caution and relief.
Yes, please," she said softly.
Her voice had a gentle tone, but there was an edge of worry in it. She looked exhausted, both from pushing the wagon and from a recent struggle that was not immediately clear to the rancher. The rancher dismounted and approached her. "I can help you with that wheel. It looks like it's about to give out completely." She nodded gratefully, and together they examined the damage. The wheel was split and loose, the wood worn thin by travel and age. It was not something that could be fixed quickly with the tools she carried. The rancher looked around, noting the empty plains stretching in every direction. "I can give you a ride to the next town. It's not far from here, and you won't have to walk with that wagon like this." She hesitated, glancing down at the broken wagon. I suppose that would be helpful," she admitted. Her voice was quiet but firm. There was a strange mixture of fear and relief in her eyes, and the rancher sensed that her life had recently taken a difficult turn. With a few quick movements, the rancher helped her load a small bundle of her belongings onto the back of his wagon. She climbed up beside him, and he gently guided the horse onto the path again. The journey began in silence, the only sounds being the soft creaking of the wagon and the distant calls of birds awakening in the morning. The rancher kept glancing at her, noting the way her hands clutched a small shawl around her shoulders. She seemed lost in thought, staring out at the endless plains with a faraway expression. After a few minutes, the rancher spoke again, trying to ease the quiet tension. "You've been traveling far?" he asked casually. She nodded, her eyes still fixed on the horizon. "Yes, I needed to get to the town. I have some things to settle there," she said, her words careful and deliberate. "It's complicated." The rancher nodded, understanding more than she realized. Life on the plains could be harsh, and everyone carried their own burdens. "Sometimes it's the unexpected turns that make life difficult," he said softly, "but it helps to have a bit of company on the way." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for a moment the two were simply two strangers sharing the quiet morning. "Thank you," she said finally. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." He smiled gently. "It's no trouble. We all need a hand now and then." As they traveled, the woman began to share small details about her life. She spoke of her home in the nearby Apache community where she had lived with her husband before he passed away. Her voice trembled slightly as she mentioned him, and the rancher felt a pang of sympathy. He had known loss himself, and he understood the quiet sorrow that lingered after someone dear was gone. "I was alone after he died," she said softly. "The days were long, and the nights even longer. I have to keep moving. Keep surviving." The rancher nodded. "I understand. Life doesn't always make it easy for anyone, but you've got strength to keep going. That's something to hold on to." There was a moment of silence between them, comfortable yet filled with unspoken understanding. The plains stretched endlessly around them, golden under the morning sun, and for a while the worries of life seemed distant. The rancher felt a sense of calm in her presence, a quiet trust that had begun to grow in the short time they shared. As the journey continued, the woman's initial wariness began to fade. She asked questions about his life on the ranch, the cattle he tended, and the long hours he spent on the land. The rancher answered honestly, sharing stories of hardship and small victories, of nights spent under the stars and days spent battling the wind and rain. She listened intently, occasionally smiling at a small joke or a clever remark. "You seem to know a lot about this land," she said finally. "I've never traveled far from my home, but you make it seem alive, almost like it's a person itself." He chuckled softly. "It has a way of speaking to those who listen. You learn the signs of weather, the tracks of animals, and the paths to safety. It's hard work, but it's rewarding in its own way." The conversation helped pass the time, and slowly the two began to feel a connection. It was not yet friendship, and certainly not love, but there was a growing respect and understanding. The rancher admired her resilience and the quiet determination she carried, while she admired his steadiness and the care he showed for the land and those around him. By the time they approached the edge of the town, the sun was higher in the sky, casting long shadows on the dirt roads and wooden buildings. Townspeople were beginning their daily routines, tending shops and moving about the streets. The rancher slowed the wagon, allowing the woman to prepare to dismount. She looked around at the new surroundings, a mixture of relief and anxiety in her expression. "I thank you again," she said quietly. "You didn't have to do this for me." He shook his head, smiling kindly. "Sometimes helping someone isn't about obligation. It's about doing what's right when you can. That's all." As they stepped into town, a sense of anticipation filled the air. Neither of them yet knew that this simple act of kindness, giving a ride to a stranger, would have consequences neither could have imagined. A traditional law in her community meant that by accepting help on this journey, the woman had unknowingly bound herself to the man who assisted her. Neither spoke of it yet, but the weight of culture, tradition, and unforeseen fate was waiting just around the corner. For now, however, they simply walked side by side into the town, strangers bound by circumstance, yet beginning a journey that neither fully understood. The plains behind them stretched endlessly, silent witnesses to the meeting that would change both of their lives forever. The townspeople watched with curiosity as the pair approached, whispers floating through the air like the morning breeze. Some recognized the woman and knew of her recent loss, while others saw the rancher and noted his quiet strength. All of them could sense that something unusual was unfolding, though no one could yet say exactly what it would lead to. As the rancher guided the woman to a modest inn at the edge of town, he noticed her hands trembling slightly. It was not fear of him, he realized, but fear of what lay ahead. He offered a reassuring smile. "We'll figure things out. You won't have to face this alone." She nodded, grateful, though a small worry lingered in her eyes. She did not yet know the full implications of the law, nor how it would change her life, but for the moment she felt a small measure of safety and comfort. And for the rancher, something unexpected had stirred, a sense of responsibility, curiosity, and perhaps even the first spark of something deeper that he had not anticipated. The morning continued, the sun climbing higher, casting warmth on the town and the two travelers. This ride, seemingly ordinary at first, had set the stage for a story of resilience, tradition, and the unlikely bond between a rancher and a widow from the Apache community. And though neither of them could see the path ahead clearly, they would face it together, one step at a time. The small inn at the edge of town was modest but clean, with wooden floors that creaked underfoot and windows that let in the warm morning light. The rancher helped the woman settle her belongings into a corner of the room, arranging the few items she had carefully so that nothing would be damaged. She looked around with a mixture of relief and unease, her eyes reflecting the tension she felt deep inside. This was a new place, a new beginning, and yet a reminder that her life had changed in ways she did not fully understand. As she sat on the edge of the small bed, the rancher took a step back, giving her space. "You'll be safe here for now," he said gently. "No one will bother you." She nodded quietly, her hands folded in her lap. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped. If you hadn't offered me a ride, I might still be out there, struggling alone." The rancher felt a pang of sympathy. He had seen hardship before, but there was something about her calm bravery mixed with quiet vulnerability that struck him. "Sometimes we all need a hand," he said, "even the strongest people." For a few minutes they sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the town was beginning to stir with the sound of horse hooves, carts rolling along dirt roads, and merchants calling out the day's goods. Inside the inn, the quiet was a momentary refuge, a pause before the storm of events that neither of them had yet imagined. It was then that the woman's attention shifted. She looked at the rancher with a mixture of hesitation and resolve. "There's something I should tell you," she said softly. "My people have a law, a tradition. When a woman accepts help from a man on a journey, she is considered bound to him. By law, he becomes the man she must marry." The rancher froze, unsure if he had heard her correctly. You mean just because I helped you on the trail I am supposed to marry you? His voice was calm, but carried a note of disbelief. She nodded, her eyes lowering to her hands. Yes, it is a law that has been followed for generations. I did not think it would apply in this way, but it does. I did not want to tell you before, but you deserve to know. The rancher took a deep breath, trying to process the weight of her words. He had offered help out of kindness, expecting nothing in return. He had not considered that a simple act of assistance could have such serious consequences. Yet he looked at her, at the quiet courage in her face, and he understood that this was not a trick or a misunderstanding. This was a part of her life, her culture, and her world. I don't know what to say, he admitted finally. I never imagined that helping someone could lead to this. I know, she said softly. I never wanted it to happen this way either, but now that it has, I must follow the law. It is not about what I want, at least not entirely. It is about respect, duty, and tradition. The rancher nodded slowly. Then we must face it together. I do not want to force you into anything.
I only want to do what is right.
She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for a moment the tension between them seemed to ease slightly. There was relief in his words, a promise that he would not take advantage of her situation. And for her, that was enough for now. Over the next few days, the rancher stayed in town, helping the widow with errands and small tasks. He accompanied her to the market, where she purchased supplies she could not easily carry alone, and he helped repair the broken wheel of her wagon, making sure it was sturdy enough for the journey back home. The townspeople watched with curiosity, some whispering about the unusual pair, others offering quiet approval. During these days, the widow shared more about her life. She spoke of her husband, who had been kind and brave, and of the struggles she faced after his death. She spoke of her community, the customs she held dear, and the way her people lived in harmony with the land. Her voice was steady, even when recounting moments of sorrow, and the rancher listened with patience and understanding. You have been through so much, he said one afternoon, as they walked through the town square. And yet you keep moving forward. That takes real strength. She smiled faintly, a small spark of warmth in her eyes. I do what I must. Life does not wait for grief or fear. We continue, because that is what is expected, and because we must survive. The rancher admired her resilience. It reminded him of the harsh realities of ranch life, the long hours, the hard work, the constant challenges. He understood that survival required determination, courage, and sometimes accepting help when it was offered. As the days passed, their interactions became more comfortable. They shared small stories, laughed at minor mishaps, and began to learn each other's habits and ways of thinking. The rancher taught her a few skills that were useful on the ranch, such as handling the horses and managing supplies, while she shared knowledge of local plants, tracking techniques, and other lessons from her community. Despite the growing connection, the weight of the law lingered. The widow felt conflicted, torn between her desire for independence and her duty to follow tradition. She wondered if accepting the rancher's help meant giving up her freedom, yet she also realized that the law was not meant to punish, but to create bonds of respect and responsibility. The rancher, too, wrestled with his feelings. He had not sought this obligation, yet he could not ignore the responsibility now placed upon him. He wanted to do right by her, to honor her culture, and to ensure that any decisions made would be fair and respectful. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long shadows across the town, they sat on the steps of the inn, watching the sky turn shades of gold and pink. The widow broke the silence. I do not want to be forced into something, she said quietly. I want to choose what is best for both of us, even if the law says otherwise. The rancher nodded. I feel the same. We cannot ignore the law, but we can choose how we approach it. We can start slowly, learn about each other, and see where it leads. Nothing has to be rushed. There was a pause, and then she smiled faintly. It was a small gesture, but it carried hope. I think I can do that, she said. I can try, at least. Over the next few days, they continued to navigate the challenges of the town and the expectations of the community. The widow introduced the rancher to members of her tribe, explaining the situation and the law. Some elders were stern, reminding them of tradition, while others were more understanding, seeing the rancher's genuine respect and care. Slowly, trust was built, and the initial tension began to ease. The rancher also spoke with townspeople who were curious or skeptical. He explained that he had not sought this connection, but that he was willing to honor it with fairness and integrity. Many were impressed by his honesty and calm demeanor, noting that he approached the situation with respect rather than force or pride. During these interactions, the widow began to see the rancher in a new light. He was not just a man who offered help, he was someone willing to learn, to listen, and to respect her world. She felt a sense of safety and stability in his presence, a rare comfort after the loss and upheaval she had experienced. One afternoon, as they walked through a quiet street lined with wooden houses, the widow spoke of her fears. "I worry about what people think, about the expectations, and about losing myself in this process. I want to honor my people, but I also want to honor who I am." The rancher looked at her with understanding. "You do not have to lose yourself. That is not what this law is about. It is about responsibility, yes, but also about care and respect. We will find a way to make it work, together, without losing what makes you who you are." For the first time, she felt a small sense of relief. The path ahead was still uncertain, and the weight of tradition remained, but she knew she was not alone. The rancher's words, steady and sincere, offered a guiding light through the fog of worry and doubt. As the sun set fully, casting a warm glow over the town, the two of them returned to the inn. The day had been long, filled with conversation, learning, and small steps toward understanding. Yet in the quiet of the evening, they both felt a growing sense of connection, a bond not yet fully defined, but one that offered hope for the days to come. The law, once a source of fear, now felt like a framework rather than a cage. It was a starting point, a way to guide their interactions and decisions rather than a force that dictated every choice. Together they could navigate the challenges ahead, honoring both tradition and their own emerging trust and respect for each other. The night settled over the town, peaceful and still. The widow lay in her modest bed, reflecting on the strange journey that had begun with a broken wagon and a simple act of kindness. The rancher sat outside on the steps, watching the stars appear one by one, thinking of the responsibility and honor now placed upon him. Neither could predict the future, but both understood that the encounter on the plains had changed their lives forever. For now they had taken the first steps, faced the law together, and begun a journey of understanding and respect. The story was only beginning, and the road ahead would test them in ways they could not yet see. But it was a road they would walk side by side. The days passed slowly, each one bringing the widow and the rancher closer together. What had started as a cautious interaction grew into a rhythm of shared tasks and quiet understanding. The rancher remained in town, helping her repair her wagon and gather supplies for the long journey back to her home. He never pushed her into conversation, yet he spoke when needed, offering guidance, humor, and a sense of calm that she had not felt since her husband's passing. She watched him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. There was something steady about him, a quiet strength that did not demand attention but commanded respect. The way he worked with his hands, the care he gave to animals, and the way he listened to her words made her begin to feel a trust she had thought impossible. She had lost much in life, yet in his presence she felt a small spark of hope. A reminder that not all strangers brought harm. One morning, the rancher suggested they take a walk outside the town to observe the plains. "It helps to understand the land before traveling," he said. "You will need it when you return home." She agreed, and they set off along the narrow trail leading away from the town. The sunlight was warm on their shoulders, and the wind carried the scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. As they walked, the rancher explained the signs of the plains, how to read the tracks of animals, how to find water in hidden streams, and how to anticipate sudden weather changes. She listened carefully, absorbing each lesson. "You seem to know this land well," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. "I never realized how much there is to notice. Every step has meaning." The rancher smiled. "It's a skill learned over time. The land teaches you if you pay attention. You will notice it too, soon enough." They paused near a small creek, where the water ran clear and cool over smooth stones. The widow knelt to fill a small container, watching the rancher as he adjusted his hat against the sun. For the first time, she allowed herself to speak freely about her life, about her fears, and about the loneliness she had felt since her husband's death.
"It has been hard," she admitted quietly.
"I thought I would never feel safe again, never feel comfort. I had no one to help me, no one to rely on." The rancher looked at her, his expression gentle. "It is not easy to face life alone, but you have strength inside you. You survived when many would have given up. That is something to be proud of." She smiled faintly. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that reached deep inside her. She realized that he did not pity her. He respected her. And in that respect she found a comfort she had not known she needed. Over the following days, their routines became intertwined. The rancher helped her repair fences near her home, guided her in caring for livestock, and assisted with gathering firewood. She, in turn, taught him how to recognize plants that could be used for food or medicine, how to understand the movements of local wildlife, and the ways her community honored traditions and respected nature. Through these shared tasks, a bond began to grow. It was not yet love, not yet romance, but a connection rooted in trust, respect, and mutual reliance. Each small moment, lifting a heavy log together, sharing a simple meal, or laughing at a minor mistake, brought them closer. They began to anticipate each other's actions, finish each other's sentences, and find comfort in the simple presence of one another. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, they sat by a fire outside her home. The flames flickered against the darkening sky, casting warm light on their faces. She looked at him, noticing for the first time the subtle details, the lines of experience on his face, the kindness in his eyes, the way he listened with patience. "I never thought I would meet someone like you," she said softly. "Not here, not now." He looked at her, surprised by the honesty in her words. "I did not expect it either," he admitted, "but I am glad I did. You have a strength that inspires me, and a quiet courage I cannot help but admire." There was a long silence as the fire crackled and the stars appeared in the sky. Neither of them spoke, yet the connection between them deepened. They had begun to understand each other, not just the surface details of their lives, but the emotions, fears, and hopes that shaped who they were. As the days continued, they faced small challenges that tested their growing bond. A sudden storm forced them to work together to secure the livestock and protect the home. A misunderstanding with neighbors required careful conversation and patience. Each obstacle, though minor, reinforced their reliance on one another. They discovered that their skills complemented each other. The rancher's knowledge of the land and practical work, paired with her understanding of people and nature, created a balance neither had anticipated. One afternoon, while working in the fields, the widow paused and looked at the rancher. "I never thought I would feel this, safe, not since my husband passed. But with you, I feel a little lighter, like I can breathe again." The rancher stopped, surprised by the depth of her words. He had not expected her to open up so fully, yet he felt honored by her trust. "I am glad," he said quietly. "You deserve to feel safe. You have carried so much alone for so long." It was moments like this that began to change their relationship. What had started as an obligation due to law now began to feel like choice. They were learning to care for one another not because of duty, but because they genuinely wanted to. Each shared laugh, each story told, each act of kindness built a foundation stronger than tradition alone could create. The widow began to see the rancher not just as a helper or a stranger, but as someone who could be a partner in life. She noticed the way he respected her opinions, the way he offered guidance without commanding, and the way he treated both her and the land with care. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she was not alone, where she could rely on someone without fear or shame. The rancher, too, began to see her in a new light. He admired her resilience, her intelligence, and the way she carried herself with dignity despite the hardships she had faced. He found himself looking forward to their conversations, seeking her perspective, and feeling a quiet joy in her presence. The law that had initially caused shock and confusion now felt like a bridge, guiding them to a deeper understanding of each other. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together under the stars, sharing a simple meal. The silence was comfortable, filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of their growing connection. The widow spoke softly about her hopes for the future, the small dreams she had once thought impossible. The rancher listened, offering encouragement and understanding. You have been through so much," he said, "but you are still standing. That is more than most people can say. I hope you never forget your strength." She smiled, a small warmth spreading through her chest. "I try not to. And now, I think I have someone to share it with." The words were not a confession of love, not yet, but they were an acknowledgement of the bond that had formed, the trust and respect that had grown naturally between them. It was a turning point, a moment where obligation began to transform into something more, something neither could yet fully name, but both could feel. As the night deepened, they remained outside, watching the fire die down to embers and the stars twinkle above. The plains stretched endlessly beyond the town, silent witnesses to the quiet unfolding of their story. They had faced uncertainty, tradition, and the weight of past losses, yet in each other they had found companionship, understanding, and a spark of hope. This part of their journey, the slow building of trust, respect, and connection, would become the foundation for the challenges to come. The bond they were forming was fragile, yet strong enough to endure the pressures of culture, community, and expectation. In the quiet of that evening beneath the endless sky, they both realized that they were no longer alone. The future remained uncertain, and the law that had first brought them together still loomed over their lives. Yet the days they had spent learning about each other, working together, and sharing small moments of life had created a new path, one guided not just by obligation, but by choice, understanding, and the beginnings of friendship that could grow into something more. As they prepared to rest for the night, the widow felt a sense of calm she had not known in months. She had found someone who respected her, who valued her strength, and who offered his help without demanding more than she was ready to give. And for the rancher, there was a quiet pride in seeing her confidence grow, in knowing that he could support her not just as a helper, but as a partner, even if the law had started their connection in an unexpected way. The night carried on, peaceful and still, and both felt the unspoken promise of days to come. Together they had begun the slow, delicate work of building understanding, learning to navigate the balance between tradition, duty, and personal choice. And though neither could foresee every challenge ahead, they knew that they were stronger together than apart, and that their journey was only beginning. The following weeks brought both progress and challenge for the rancher and the widow. Their connection had grown steadily, rooted in trust, understanding, and small moments of shared work and laughter. Yet the weight of expectation, tradition, and the watchful eyes of both their communities created tension they could not ignore. While their bond was strengthening, outside forces began to test it, reminding them that life on the plains was never simple. Word of the widow's journey and the rancher's assistance spread quickly through the town. Some residents were curious, eager to see the outcome of a situation that seemed unusual and dramatic. Others were skeptical, questioning whether a man from outside the community could truly honor the customs and responsibilities of the law. There were whispers at the market, glances in the street, and quiet debates in the local inn. The townspeople were not unkind, but they were watchful, expecting the pair to either succeed or fail under scrutiny. For the widow, the pressure was especially heavy. She had already navigated loss, loneliness, and the responsibilities of her household, and now she faced judgment and expectation from her own people in the neighboring town. She struggled with the dual demands of honoring tradition and preserving her own independence. There were days when she felt weary, unsure if she could meet the expectations placed upon her, yet the rancher's steady presence offered reassurance. "You are not alone," he reminded her one afternoon as they worked to mend a fence that had been damaged by a storm. "We face this together. Your people, their laws, our lives, they all matter, but we do not have to carry the weight alone." She paused, gripping the wooden post she was holding. "I know you were right. I do not want to disappoint anyone, and I do not want to lose myself in the process. My life has already changed so much. How can I be sure of the right path?" The rancher placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. "The right path is the one we take together. We listen, we learn, and we respect both the law and each other. Step by step, we find our way." Their collaboration became a daily practice. They spent mornings tending to livestock and repairing structures, afternoons walking the plains to check fences and water sources, and evenings sharing meals and conversation. Each day brought moments of laughter, small victories, and mutual respect. They began to anticipate each other's needs, finishing tasks efficiently and with care, showing a level of teamwork that impressed both themselves and those who observed them. Yet, despite these successes, challenges arose that tested their growing bond. One morning, the widow received word from her elders that certain members of her community were unhappy with the situation. Some believed the rancher did not fully understand the customs, while others feared the union would disrupt long-standing traditions. The widow felt the weight of responsibility pressing down upon her, and she turned to the rancher for guidance. "We must speak with them," he said calmly. "We cannot ignore their concerns. They deserve to be heard, and we should show them respect while also explaining our intentions." The widow nodded, appreciating his approach. Together they visited the elders, approaching the conversation with humility and sincerity. She spoke first, explaining the challenges she had faced since her husband's death and the need for support and partnership. She described how the rancher had assisted her with care, respect, and understanding, emphasizing that his actions had been guided by integrity, not self-interest. The rancher followed, addressing the elders with honesty. "I did not seek this responsibility, but now that it exists, I intend to honor it. I respect your traditions, your laws, and the widow's life. My goal is to support her and ensure that both our communities can feel confident in our partnership." The elders listened carefully, some nodding in approval, others frowning in contemplation. Questions were asked, doubts expressed, and stories from past generations shared. It was a long conversation, filled with pauses and thoughtful reflection, yet both the widow and the rancher remained patient and respectful. Their sincerity slowly began to ease the tension in the room. By the end of the discussion, the elders acknowledged the rancher's efforts and his respect for tradition. While not every concern was fully resolved, a tentative acceptance emerged, providing the widow and rancher with a sense of relief. It was not victory, but it was a step forward, proof that dialogue, patience, and integrity could bridge differences between communities and individuals. Life did not become easy after this meeting. Some neighbors remained skeptical, offering criticism disguised as advice or casual remarks in public spaces. The widow struggled to maintain her composure, balancing her duty to her people with her desire for independence. The rancher, understanding the delicate situation, provided support without overstepping. He guided, encouraged, and reassured her, making it clear that he was a partner rather than a judge or a protector, in a way that undermined her autonomy. One afternoon, while repairing a section of fence that had been weakened by recent rains, the widow paused and looked at the rancher. "I worry about what the others think," she admitted. "I fear that some will never accept this, no matter what we do." "How do we carry on with such eyes upon us?" He stopped, brushing dirt from his hands, and looked at her with calm determination. "We do what we know is right. We honor the law, respect our people, and take care of each other. We cannot control what others think, only how we act. If we remain honest, patient, and considerate, that is enough." She considered his words, feeling a sense of clarity she had not experienced before. His steady guidance reminded her that life was not about pleasing everyone, but about navigating challenges with integrity, understanding, and respect. As they continued their work, small moments of connection continued to strengthen their bond. They shared stories from their pasts, laughing at childhood misadventures or recalling lessons learned from hardship. They celebrated minor victories together, such as successfully moving a stubborn cow or repairing the gate before the next storm. These shared experiences built trust, showing them that they could rely on one another in both difficult and ordinary moments. The rancher also took care to understand the widow's needs and feelings, checking in on her well-being and offering support without judgment. He respected her quiet moments, her contemplations, and her cultural practices. Over time, the widow began to see that partnership could be based on equality, respect, and mutual care rather than obligation or power. Despite the ongoing scrutiny, the widow and rancher found joy in small victories. A repaired fence, a successful day in the fields, or an evening of laughter by the fire became markers of progress. Their growing bond was strengthened by shared responsibility, empathy, and the slow realization that together they could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable alone. As the weeks passed, their relationship matured. The widow began to trust not only the rancher's guidance, but also his judgment and intentions. She saw that his respect for her culture and her independence was genuine, not performative. The rancher, in turn, admired her resilience, wisdom, and the way she navigated the complexities of tradition and personal choice. Together, they discovered that the initial connection forced by law had become something more meaningful, a partnership built on understanding, respect, and shared experience. One evening, after a long day of repairing a barn roof damaged by a recent storm, they sat on the porch of her home watching the sun sink behind the hills. The sky glowed with shades of orange and purple, casting a warm light across the plains. The widow looked at the rancher and spoke softly. "I never thought I would feel this, supported, even with everything that has happened. I am grateful for your presence and your guidance." The rancher smiled gently. "It is my choice to be here. I do not see it as obligation, only as a chance to do what is right. And I have learned much from you as well. Your courage and wisdom inspire me every day." There was a long silence as they both reflected on the journey that had brought them together. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had grown into a complex path of understanding, challenge, and connection. The law that had initially caused fear and confusion now served as a framework for respect and dialogue. It reminded them of the responsibilities they shared, while also providing space for personal growth and mutual care. In that quiet evening, beneath the vast plains and the first stars of night, they realized that their partnership was stronger than either of them had imagined. They had faced skepticism, cultural expectations, and their own fears, yet they had emerged with a deeper connection built on shared experience. Though challenges still awaited them, both within their communities and from the unpredictability of life on the plains, they were prepared to face them together. They had learned the value of patience, the importance of listening, and the strength found in mutual respect. The journey ahead was uncertain, but the foundation they had built promised resilience, understanding, and the possibility of true partnership. The night settled over the plains, quiet and still. The widow and rancher retired to their modest rooms, carrying with them the knowledge that the challenges of the day had strengthened their bond rather than weakened it. They had faced community doubts, navigated cultural expectations, and built understanding that would serve as the cornerstone of whatever came next. As they lay awake, each thinking of the other, they recognized that life was no longer about simple survival or adherence to law alone. It was about connection, trust, and the courage to face uncertainty together. The partnership that had begun under unusual circumstances was now evolving into something richer, a shared journey of respect, understanding, and slowly growing affection. And though the eyes of the town and the elders still watched, the widow and rancher knew that they were no longer bound solely by law. They were bound by choice, trust, and a partnership that had been forged in both challenge and understanding. In that quiet moment, they could imagine a future together, one step at a time, navigating the plains, the expectations, and the heart's own quiet desires. The days grew warmer as spring settled over the plains, bringing life to the tall grasses and gentle rivers. The widow and the rancher continued their daily routines, tending the land, caring for livestock, and preparing for the future that now felt possible. Each day brought a sense of accomplishment and quiet joy, their bond deepening with every shared task and thoughtful conversation. What had begun as a connection forced by law had blossomed into a genuine partnership, built on respect, trust, and the small comforts of everyday life. The widow's elders and neighbors had gradually begun to accept the rancher's presence. They had seen his integrity, his care, and his patience. He respected both the woman and the tradition she held dear, and, in doing so, he earned the trust of those who had once doubted him. Though not every challenge or criticism had disappeared, the majority of the community now acknowledged that he was worthy of the responsibility placed upon him by law. One morning, the widow stood by the fence, watching the sun rise over the plains, painting the sky with shades of gold and rose. The rancher joined her silently, placing a hand on the post beside her. "The land is waking up," he said softly. "It reminds us that life moves forward, no matter the hardships." She smiled faintly, taking in the vast landscape. "It feels different now. Not just because the seasons change, but because I see possibility. I see a life that is mine, yet shared." He nodded. "We've worked hard for that. Every day we've built something stronger than fences or barns. We've built understanding, trust, and care. That cannot be undone." The widow turned to him, her eyes reflecting both relief and gratitude. "I never imagined I could feel hope again. Not after everything I've lost. And yet, here it is." They had faced so much together. The initial shock of tradition, the scrutiny of neighbors, and their own fears and uncertainties. And yet, through patience, respect, and cooperation, they had grown not just closer, but stronger. Each challenge had tested their bond, but each challenge had also made it more resilient. In the following weeks, the pair began preparing for a proper union that would honor both the law and their communities. They consulted the elders, making sure that every step respected tradition, and they sought advice from trusted neighbors to ensure fairness and goodwill. The process was deliberate and careful, and it required compromise, understanding, and careful attention to both culture and personal choice. The day of the ceremony arrived with a clear sky and gentle winds. The town gathered along the main road, and members of the widow's community came from nearby settlements bringing offerings of food, decorations, and simple gifts to honor the occasion. It was a celebration not only of union but of partnership, respect, and the blending of two worlds. The widow wore a modest dress, chosen to reflect both her heritage and the practical simplicity of her life on the plains. Her dark hair was carefully arranged, and her eyes shone with a quiet confidence. She had carried grief, responsibility, and uncertainty, but she now stood with strength, dignity, and the knowledge that she was not alone. The rancher, dressed in his best attire, though still simple, stood beside her with a calm pride. He had learned much about her traditions and had prepared carefully to honor them. His hands, calloused from work on the ranch, now rested gently by his sides, steady and reassuring. The ceremony was simple, yet meaningful. Words were spoken by the elders recounting the history of the law, the significance of partnership, and the responsibilities that come with shared life. The widow and the rancher listened attentively, understanding that this moment was both a beginning and a culmination, a bridge between tradition and personal choice. When it came time to exchange vows, the widow spoke first. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of her experiences and the clarity of her decision. "I accept this partnership not only because of law, but because of respect, trust, and understanding. I choose to walk this path together with care, honesty, and hope." The rancher responded with equal sincerity. "I accept this responsibility, and I embrace it with respect for tradition, for you, and for the life we will build together. I promise to act with integrity, patience, and care, honoring both our worlds and the bond we share. As they exchanged simple symbols of their commitment, a hand clasped in support, a token of the land, a promise of care, the community watched with quiet approval. The union was not only a legal matter, but a reflection of human connection, respect, and shared purpose. The murmurs of doubt had faded, replaced by recognition of the genuine partnership that had been forged through effort, patience, and understanding. After the ceremony, the widow and rancher walked through the town, side by side, receiving congratulations and warm smiles. The townspeople had seen their journey, the way they had worked together, respected each other, and faced challenges with patience, and many now regarded them as an example of what partnership could be when built on trust and care, rather than obligation alone. Life after the ceremony settled into a comfortable rhythm. The widow brought her knowledge of the land, her understanding of people, and her wisdom from past experiences into the rancher's world. He, in turn, shared his skills, experience, and steady guidance. Together, they maintained the ranch, cared for livestock, repaired buildings, and managed the daily challenges of life on the plains. Their days were full of labor, yet each task was enriched by their shared commitment and mutual respect. They also made time for small moments of connection, walking the plains at sunset, sharing meals by the fire, and laughing at minor mishaps or unexpected occurrences. These moments, simple yet meaningful, reinforced the bond they had built, reminding them that life's joy often came from shared effort and understanding rather than grand gestures or material rewards. The widow's community began to see the transformation as well. She had grown more confident, her voice carried authority, and her ability to balance tradition with personal choice inspired those around her. The rancher's integrity and respect for her ways earned admiration, creating bridges between communities and fostering goodwill. Together, they had shown that partnership could respect the past while embracing the future. Over time, the rancher and widow began to plan for the long term. They worked on expanding the ranch, planting crops, ensuring that their home and land could sustain both them and future generations. The widow's understanding of local plants and natural resources combined with the rancher's practical experience created a partnership that was both efficient and harmonious. They learned from each other, adjusted when needed, and celebrated progress together, strengthening both their lives and their bond. Evenings were often spent by the fire, recounting the events of the day, discussing dreams, and planning for the future. The widow shared stories of her past, her family, and the traditions she cherished, while the rancher recounted tales of the land, challenges overcome, and the lessons he had learned from hard work. These conversations, rich with knowledge and experience, deepened their connection and reinforced the respect and admiration they had developed for each other. The seasons changed, bringing summer warmth and the first hints of autumn coolness. The widow and rancher adapted to each new challenge, always together. When storms threatened the plains, they worked side by side to protect livestock and buildings. When crops flourished, they celebrated together. Each success and setback strengthened the understanding and care that had become the foundation of their partnership. Through it all, the bond that had begun under unusual circumstances evolved into something remarkable. What started as obligation guided by law had become a genuine choice, a partnership built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared effort. They had faced doubt, criticism, and uncertainty, yet emerged with a connection that was both practical and deeply personal. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, the widow and rancher stood together, watching the colors of the sky deepen into shades of orange, pink, and purple. The plains stretched endlessly before them, alive with wind, grass, and the quiet hum of life. The widow leaned slightly on the rancher's shoulder, feeling the steady warmth and support that had become a constant in her life. "I never imagined life could feel like this again," she said softly. "I thought I would always be alone, carrying burdens with no one to share them. But now, I have found partnership, respect, and hope." The rancher smiled, his hand brushing against hers. "We found it together. Not because of law alone, but because we chose to work, to listen, and to care. That is what makes this strong." She nodded, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment she had not known in years. The hardships, the doubts, and the challenges had not vanished, but they no longer felt insurmountable. Together, they could face anything: storms, hard work, and the uncertainties of life on the plains. Their partnership was their strength, built on shared experience, respect, and genuine care. The night settled over the plains, quiet and serene. The widow and rancher returned to their home, walking side by side, ready to face each day with patience, understanding, and a bond that had been tested and proven true. Life would continue to bring challenges, but they now knew that they would face them together, guided by trust, respect, and the choices they had made. And so, the story concluded not as a tale of obligation alone, but as a story of connection, partnership, and the remarkable ways that kindness, respect, and shared effort can transform lives. The widow and rancher had started with an unexpected ride, bound by law, yet they ended with a life built on understanding, cooperation, and a deep, enduring partnership.